What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. I would like to introduce my second greatest boxer of all times to you. His name was Harry Greb. Edward Henry Greb, better known to the boxing community as the Pittsburgh Windmill. He stood 5 foot 8 inches and had a 71-inch reach. Born June 1894 and died October 22nd, 1926. 32 years of age, and he would reside in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Had well over 300 bouts. The Ring Magazine Boxing Hall of Famer. Fought from May 8th, 1913 to August 19th, 1926. 13 years in the game, and his first bout was in Pennsylvania at the Liberty Hall. His last contest was in New York, 1926, Madison Square Garden against Theodore Tiger Flowers. And that's when he would lose his World Middleweight Championship title. Had well over 200 bouts in Pennsylvania. Between May 8, 1913 and December 6, 1913, he had 7 wins, 2 losses, 1 draw, and he was knocked out in the second round. November 29th, 1913, against Joe Chip at the Old City Hall in Pennsylvania. I want to explain something to you. 1 second. This date is very, very important. Why? November 29th, 1913. Joe Chip knocks out Harry Greb in Harry Greb's first year as a professional. Why is that interesting? Who was Joe Chip? Joe Chip was the brother of George Chip. George Chip was the middleweight champion of the world. He took his title from Frank Klaus. And Joe Chip, who was not an established professional. What I mean by that, he wasn't in the rankings. But he was in the ring with some pretty decent fighters. But he understood the game. So much so, he became a trainer. He was in a corner of Jack Dempsey in 1919, Toledo, Ohio, against Jess Willard. And why there's a connection of Joe Chip and why it's very important for you to understand the date of November 29th, 1913, is because you have to understand you must have someone in your entourage to check the equipment of your opponent. What am I saying? When Joe Chip knocked out Harry Greb was completely out and he woke up. He didn't understand where he was, but he did say it was the hardest punch he'd ever received. 1919, Joe Chip is in the corner of the Manasseh Moeller, Jack Dempsey, Kid Blackie. And Jack Dempsey completely dog-walked Jess Willard. Jess Willard had damages, about 4 to 5 broken teeth, broken jawbone, fractured eye socket, broken ankle, a few broken ribs. His wrist was dislocated against Jack Dempsey, who weighed 185 pounds. And there was a corner man in the corner of Jess Willard. His name was Walter Monahan. Why is his name significant? He was in a ring with Harry Greb. And he sparred with Harry Greb. He stated Jack Dempsey had plaster of Paris in his right hand. Jack Kearns, who was the manager of Jack Dempsey, told Jack Dempsey he placed a wager that Jack Dempsey would get rid of Jess Willard in 1 round. Once the contest was stopped in the first round, at least they thought it was stopped, but the round happened to be over. Jack Dempsey was hustling out of the ring. Jack Kearns, who had left the ring, they called Jack Kearns to let Jack Dempsey know he had to come back into the ring. The fight was not over yet. But Jack Dempsey flew out of the ring. They got him to come back into the ring. And that's when Jack Dempsey mauled Jess Willard. Jess Willard had the heart of a lion and the endurance of a water buffalo. He wouldn't quit until he couldn't take it anymore. That was in the days when you can hit a man while he was down. Once he was off one knee, you couldn't touch him. But technically, well, if his knees were down, you couldn't hit him. But once one knee went up, you could, basically. And so the connection is that Joe Chip was a person that you had to watch out for. And that's why you must check the gloves of your opponent. You must check the mouth guard of your opponent. And you must make sure everything's on the up and up. Lesson learned by Joe Chip, November 29th, 1913. In 1919, with Jack Dempsey and Jess Willard. Now, Joe Chip was a Lithuanian-American middleweight. Scranton, Pennsylvania was his home. As I stated, he was the brother of George Chip. And George Chip defeated Frank Klaus. And George Chip became the middleweight champion of the world. Well, Harry Greb had a record of 45-0 in 1919. 1919 was the year, as I stated, that Jack Dempsey would become the brand new heavyweight champion of the world. And Gene Tunney would become the AEF, America's Expeditionary Force light heavyweight. And that was some year. On January 15th, 1919, Greb would defeat Leo Florian Hook in 12 rounds in Boston. January 27th of 1919, Greb would defeat Soldier Barfield, and he would receive a 12-round no decision verdict in Columbus. On August 29th, 1921, Forbes Field, Pennsylvania, Harry Greb would defeat William Ward, better known as Kid Norfolk, 10 rounds. It was in front of 6,000 spectators, and Ward would decide to thumb Harry Greb in the eye. Why? Because Greb deliberately headbutted William Ward. What you didn't do with William Ward, you didn't play. William Ward was in a ring before this bout with a fighter by the name of John Lester Johnson. Now, John Lester Johnson had broke the ribs of Jack Dempsey in 1916. Well, he was in a ring with William Ward. And in the middle of the ring, when the referee had called both men into the middle for instructions, John Lester Johnson said something that you don't say in the black community. He called him a Willie boy. Now, that was just as bad as calling another young man a sissy. A black man didn't call another black man a Willie boy, because that's what was said to another black man from the overseers. And it was the most insult that you can give another black man. And so William Ward was offended. And he did a number on John Lester Johnson, as he would now become a very aggressive-minded fighter. Well, when Harry Greb headbutted Kid Norfolk didn't take that too well, so he would thumb Harry Greb in the eye. Well, this would cause Harry Greb to go another 47 fights blind in one eye until 1926, when he would retire. Now, William Ward was the Panamanian heavyweight champion. Stood 5'10". And he would become a two-time colored light heavyweight champion when he defeat Lee Anderson. Now, let me tell you how that bout took place. Lee Anderson, who was the Harlem Bully, William Ward, Kid Norfolk. You had Jack Blackburn and Joe Jeanette and Harry Wills and Sam Langford. Theodore Tiger Flowers, Big Bill Tate. They all used to hang out at the Supper Club. It was known as the Supper Lounge. And this was in 22. Jack Johnson owned the club. He had the Supper Club downstairs and Club Deluxe upstairs. And they used to hang out there before that closed down when they went over to a Grub's Gym on 116th Street. And that's where they hung out, a Club Deluxe and the Supper Club. So Kid Norfolk used to wear his hat to the side. He used to love to play dice, CeeLo. Take the dice, shake them up, and bounce them against the wall. Well, he put a wager with Tiger Flowers because Tiger Flowers would face Lee Anderson for the vacant and newly developed colored light heavyweight championship, and Lee Anderson would defeat Tiger Flowers. But he was supposed to give Tiger Flowers a return go. So while they were playing CeeLo, the bet was whoever wins fights Lee Anderson for that title next. And Kid Norfolk had defeated Tiger Flowers and CeeLo. So he was up next to face Lee Anderson. And then he would defeat Lee Anderson. But that's how that fight was made. But Kid Norfolk would take on Joe Jeanette and Blackburn and Sam Langford and Theodore Tiger Flowers, battling Siki, John Lester Johnson, Big Bill Tate, Jeff Clark, the Joplin Ghost, Ralph House Ware, battling Jim Johnson, just to name a few. But on August 31st, 1923, Harry Greb would become the 16th world middleweight champion when he would defeat Harlem's Southpaw, New York's Madison Square Garden. His name was Johnny Wilson. And this was 6 months after he would lose a 15-round decision and lose his America's Light Heavyweight Championship title to Greenwich Village, Gene Tunney. Now, Harry Greb would defeat Gene Tunney in 22, and he would take his title away from him, and that would be Gene Tunney's first and only defeat. That's one of Harry Greb's credentials. Gene Tunney would face fighters such as Powell Reed and Soldier Jones, Byron Donald, Tommy Loughran, who was the Philly Phantom out of Philadelphia. He was a light heavyweight champion. In fact, he would take on Primo Carnera, and that would be the widest disparity in weight of all times. Gene Tunney would also take on Chuck Wiggins, and of course Jack Dempsey, 2 separate times, Philadelphia and Soldiers Field in Chicago. He had 16 bouts in 1923. I'm speaking of Harry Greb. 4 bouts in January, 3 bouts in February, 1 in August, 3 in October, 2 in November, 3 in December. 1924, he had 16 bouts. 1 in January, 1 in February, 1 in April, 2 in May, 3 in June, 1 in August. He lost on a foul. He had 3 no decisions, 1 draw. He would take on Johnny Wilson, Fade Kaiser, Martin Berkey, Powell Reed, and Teddy Moore, as well as Jimmy Slattery and Tommy Loughran, as well as Gene Tunney, Theodore Tiger Flowers, Kid Norfolk. A remarkable career Harry Greb would have. But on July 2nd, 1925, in New York's Polo Grounds, Harry Greb would take on a toy bulldog, Elizabeth, New Jersey, 5'7" welterweight. He was a welterweight champion. He was a very good boxer and a good bowling fighter. He would take on Pete Latzo. His name was Mickey Walker. And Harry Greb would defeat Walker in 15 rounds. They fought 2 separate occasions. Let me tell you what happened in their last bout. After the fight was over, they would hang one up in the bar. And Mickey Walker would begin to talk a lot of jive to Harry Greb. Greb didn't like it, told him to knock it off. Mickey Walker insisted that the decision was wrong, he was the winner. Harry Greb said, well, if you don't like that, let's step outside. Mickey Walker said, let's have at it. He slammed down his glass on the table. And he took off his jacket. And when Harry Greb was attempting to take off his arm got caught in the sleeve, and Mickey Walker slugged him. Snuffed him, as we call it. Threw him to the ground head first. Began pounding. They would break it up. Mickey Walker went on his way staggering. Harry Greb was in the ring with fighters such as Gene Tunney, Kid Lewis, who was a black fighter, Johnny Wilson, middleweight champion, Maxie Rosenblum, light heavyweight champion, Tony Maulino, Soldier Bart, Roland Todd, Tommy Loughran, Philly Phantom was a light heavyweight champion, Brian Downey, Jeff Smith, the Bayonne Globetrotter, Australian middleweight champion, Mike Gibbons, K.O. Brown, Mike Mateague, who was a light heavyweight champion, took the title away from Battling Siki, Bob Moha, Clay Turner, Ed Gunboat Smith, Tommy Gibbons, Larry One Punch Williams, Pal Reed, and Jack Gunart. Yeah, Chuck Wiggins, Joe Chip, Bill Brennan. Bill Brennan was in the ring with Jack Dempsey in 1920 New York's Madison Square Garden. Leo Florian Hook, battling Levinsky, who was a light heavyweight champion. Zulu Kid, George K.O. Brown, Frank Klaus, middleweight champion. Michael Dow, middleweight champion. Lynn Rowland, Joe Burrell. Joe Burrell was out of New York and moved to Philadelphia. Knockout Brennan. Billy Miskey. Augie Ratner. Theodore Tiger Flowers, the first black middleweight champion. Martin Berkey. Jimmy Delaney. Al Roberts. Allentown Joe Gans, who was a colored middleweight champion. Young Fisher. Jack Duffy. Jack Dillon, who was a light heavyweight champion. Eddie Coleman. Sergeant Sammy Baker. Eddie McCarthy. One Round Davis. Yankee Gilbert. Willie Langford. Kid Graves, who was the second fighter to stop Harry Greb. Harry Greb had a broken bone. You know, that's just a handful of the fighters that Harry Greb would face. He was 45-0 in 1919. On August 19, 1926, in New York's Madison Square Garden, the referee Jim Crawley had raised the hand of Theodore Tiger Flowers to declare him the first black middleweight champion in boxing history and the first black fighter to win a title in New York's Madison Square Garden. It was in front of 15,000 spectators. Harry Greb was severely injured, and they tried to sue him for $250,000 before he walked into the ring. Harry Greb, in my opinion, second greatest fighter in boxing history. The accolades shows it. He was in there with the best of the best. He's challenged them all, from middleweight to heavyweight. Gene Tunney, Jack Dempsey, none of them wanted to fight him. He was a tremendous fighter. And he fought the majority of his bouts blind in one eye. Keep in mind, when he was thumbed by William Ward in 21, that was before he had that 5-bout series with Gene Tunney. That was before he became the middleweight champion of the world, the 16th middleweight champion of the world. Remarkable fighter was Harry Greb. That's my number 2. He fought Jamaica Kid and Lee Anderson, Frank Mintel and Bob Moha, Mike Mateague and George Compartier, Billy Packey, Frank Klaus, Jack Dempsey. Jack Dempsey did not want to face Harry Greb. See you in the next video. And my number 3 ranked fighter. Be well.